So we will get started with this DSP aspects in IoT. Again, you can ask what is so special about IoT that you have to talk about DSP for IoT, right? There is not probably anything very specific about just IoT. It's just DSP which fits into IoT is what we are going to talk about. Just before moving on, how many of you have taught a DSP course? Okay, some of you have taught. So again, you have to bear with me for this review kind of thing which I am going to do. So the idea of this session is that of all the things which play a role in IoT, you might have already heard yesterday from Professor Pramod that the part he covered was starting from sensors, mainly on the sensor part, and he said, okay, the sensors sense the environment. There is some signal which is coming in. Typically, the sensor is giving some analog output, and that analog output is processed, and you have a process using an ADC, and you have a digital signal represented, right? So now, once you have this digital signal, you have to do something with this digital signal, right? So just keep it a little bit more flexible. So what kind of things are we expecting to do in this digital analysis or processing? Any ideas? So now that your sensor is there, it has sensed something, some environment. The sensor has sensed something, most likely an analog output from the sensor. It goes through ADC, and the way I look at it is there is some DSP or digital signal processing here, and again you have let's say DAC here and something happened here, right? So as I said, so the reason why it is why this fits into the IoT scenario is because there are almost most applications which you use will have to do some analysis of this data, right? Or not just analysis, some processing of this data, and that is why we want to look at this digital signal processing. So based on what you saw yesterday, which was some few examples of these sensors, any ideas where this DSP will be useful? Where will this digital signal processing be useful?
Vibration analysis.
Vibration analysis. How is this useful?
Analyze vibration of a every machine.
Okay.
And the machine with some kind of fault. So DSP can help us to distinguish between the machine and faulty machine.
So what kind of analysis do you mean?
We can do frequency analysis there.
Yeah. So one which is a valid thing is that you sense this vibration using some sensor, that some signal received do the same thing, and I guess as was mentioned, you do some kind of frequency analysis, right? So what do we mean by frequency analysis?
Finding out the frequency component of the
Frequency component of the signal.
particular peak or the
maximum or lower is coming on that particular frequency that we are finding.
Okay. Yeah. So something more specific. I mean, it's kind of in the right direction. Can you be a little bit specific? Or like since the gentleman. So can you just elaborate so that you know the context. So if you can say a little bit more, then it will be a little easier.
So we can find out the frequency band
Yeah.
from the signal.
Correct.
And once we have a different frequency bands, we can classify also. There also we can try out with different filters that are implemented on DSP as well.
Yeah. So while he was talking about analysis, which is the part which I wanted to just kind of look at one aspect of it, it also probably can do something slightly different than analysis, which is just filters, right? Filters means it's like some kind of filtering operation, and analysis here is the part which helps us understand the signal better, right? So what is this? Just to kind of add on to what he said, what we mean by this analysis here is So for example, if this machine is rotating at certain speed, if you just sense that, let's say it could be vibration or it could be just a signal, some related to that machine, it will have certain frequency components, and because of this vibration, there may be other frequency components introduced into the signal, and our objective would be to see what are these frequency components, right? So that's why this frequency analysis of any given signal will be useful. Of course, the question can be, why do this in the digital domain? You could do some of these things in analog domain also, but given the flexibility and tools which are available in the digital processing or digital signal processing, this seems a little bit more easier to do, okay? That is analyzing a given signal in terms of its frequency content, right? Similarly, if you go one step back, before actually doing this analysis in this DSP, which this could be one part of it, the other part is, once you have an A to D or ADC, you have taken the analog signal, you digitize and send it here. Sometimes this analog signal itself will have some kind of analog processing which happens here, or the sensor itself will do some kind of basic processing in the beginning to remove some kinds of noise, right? But it's possible that despite the analog operation on the signal, when it goes through the ADC and when it comes to the DSP, there could be some other noise or non-required signals which may have to be removed, and that is what this, and that can also be done efficiently using what are called as filters, right? So which means then you can have there could be an analog filter which filters the signal in the analog domain. After you A to D, there may be some signal which probably cannot be filtered in the analog domain, and you may have to do it in the digital domain, right? So this is where DSP helps in trying to do some of these things. With respect to vibration analysis, this is one kind of approach. She also mentioned few other things which are all useful things, which hopefully you will see a little later. Which was, he said that, okay, once you analyze it, you could also classify, right? He said that whether it is it a noisy signal, or is it because of vibration, or is it because of something, right? So that, again, depending on the domain you are looking at, is something very useful. For example, so okay, let's now move away from this vibration analysis. Any other applications you can think of where DSP is going to play a part? Yeah, I think ECG yesterday again was mentioned briefly, I think. So ECG signals, which is again one of the very useful signals nowadays. Many of us have devices on us which is recording not directly ECG but something related to ECG, right? So that's again a signal which you want to analyze, but the requirement for a ECG analysis versus a vibration analysis can be quite different. What is the main difference?
That we are finding out the QRS complex to find the time duration between these two RPs is useful to make the other devices like
yeah. In some sense, what it kind of indicates as the last thing what he said was useful. So what it is going to activate, right? What this analysis is going to help activate may be very time critical, right? So it means we may have to operate things on what is called as a real time versus a pseudo real time or non real time. In sense, for example, you are looking at vibration analysis of a machine. It's okay to have a delay in understanding that this machine is vibrating with some, I mean, the fault is so bad that it has to be immediately attended, can happen with a delay. Of course, it depends on the kind of machines you are looking at. But whereas if you are looking at, let's say, for example, you are using monitoring the ECG like signal to, let's say, activate the pacemaker within our body, right? So there, the time you have to activate this device may not be significant enough. So you have to do something kind of quite fast, right? So that would need us to do things in real time, which means you could do some computation, but these computations have to be done within a very specific strict deadline, and that's what is called as real time, right? So again, sometimes these DSPs help us achieve this. Well, not just DSPs, you could use better process, but traditionally to kind of have such performance measures, we rely on using DSPs because there are less overheads in what is to be done, right? So it's like, so one was vibration analysis, the other was, let's say, biomedical signal analysis, right? So these are kind of 1D, right? You can of course extend it to 2D, and which means you could do similar things with images and video, right? Once you extend this to images and video, what is the big difference? So these are just 1D signals which vary with time. Now if you think of image or video, so we move to 2D, but what is the trade-off? What is that going to be more important to us?
Number of computation will be higher in 2D and 3D.
Yeah, so once you go to 2D or even 3D in terms of video, which means you look at 2D across time, so your computational load becomes significantly more than what you would do in a 1D processing, right? Again, I'm not going to talk about all aspects of 2D processing, but just to give you a sense of what could be done in a DSP or in the kind of purview of a DSP kind of thing. So you'll have to also move from 1 to 2 or 3D, which means you need to do more computations, again with some constraints on time, and see how you achieve it, right? So this is kind of the setting for what we want to look at DSP, because many times you could do many of these things with your microcontroller itself, right? Many of this, the thermal sensing which you're doing, which in the lab and other things, you don't need a really DSP to do all these things. But again, because I'm talking about DSP doesn't mean all the signals which we are sensing have to use a DSP. There are many applications which may not really need a DSP, but there are certain applications which will need a DSP. So in that sense, let's say for example audio processing or image or video processing would need some kind of DSP to do this processing more faster. In some sense, that's a vague word, but to achieve some kind of real-time requirements, right? So what I'm going to do today is I'm not going to give you every aspect of it, but I'll just touch on few of these things so that most of you are familiar with things which either you do during this session or later when you get back. Okay, that's my objective for this. Yes.
What we are talking about is signal processing per se.
This doesn't have to be an IoT.
Correct.
What you are talking about is signal processing by default.
Correct.
This could be a single sensor or maybe any device that we use. How would this be different when we talk about a IoT? I guess what I'm asking is, when we talk about IoT, we are talking about large number of devices from where the data is coming.
Correct.
So how does the signal processing technique change in that case? Or does data analytics makes more sense there rather than signal processing? Because what you're talking about is very local level processing, which I guess would happen in any device wherever, you know.
Correct.
That was my question.
Yeah. So I think that's a valid question. Again, it fits into the other feedback we had. Like, why should we look at DSP in the context of IoT, right? I think that you yourself did give the answer. So DSP is kind of a local processing, right? When would a local processing make sense, right? So that is the kind of question you have to ask if you are going to use DSP for IoT, right? It's not that all this processing which I said now, right? For example, whether the vibration analysis, even if you have, in this case, maybe you have many sensors, right? Vibration analysis, there are many motors, you have many sensors sensing vibration in different machines, which means it could give you an idea of this entire, what I would say, entire platform. Let's say there is a platform, there are many machines mounted, then you have signals from all these multiple sensors, and you want to analyze something based on the multiple signals, right? So which means that doesn't necessarily mean it is IoT. It can be just multiple signals. So instead of taking a single channel input coming in here, you're going to take this multiple input and do some processing. Only question is whether you need to use these multiple inputs to process and get your output at the same time, or you could do something simpler, right? Which means you don't need a DSP. Yes, I think this is just what we are trying to say, or what I'm trying to say here is, it does not anything specific to IoT. DSP is DSP, DSP is just signal processing. Only thing, when you are going to choose a DSP, there are certain things you have to consider, and you have to see whether does it really need a DSP, right? So that is all you have to make, and that doesn't change the problem itself. Like, I mean, it's not really helping just IoT. So that's why if you say, can we give a DSP for IoT? There is no like DSP for IoT. DSP is DSP. It's just that IoT is around DSP, around communication. All these aspects have to enable such IoT application.
One possible example that I could think of was, suppose we use a bunch of the IoT nodes, we put them on the slope of a mountain, and based on the vibration content that we get, maybe we are able to conclude whether any landslide is occurring or is likely to occur.
Correct.
That perhaps could be some usage of the signal processing or something that we are getting from multiple sensors. And in that case, perhaps the whole issue of time may come into picture, that I may have to do signal processing on the consolidated data that I'm getting. And but if the data is not coming together, if it's coming intermittently, then what do maybe that part of signal processing could be useful as far as IoT is concerned. That's what I could think of.
Yeah, so I think so this is why I even earlier when there was a mention of this classification, I didn't want to spend too much time on it. But again, this is again a valid thing as to where is really this going to be useful is. So I mean, I said classification, meaning you have given one signal or maybe you are given multiple signals. Like as was mentioned, it's a set of sensors mounted and it's giving some signal, right? So ideally, why is DSP useful or signal processing is useful is, what I would say is, let's say, feature representation. So it's a little bit deviation from what I wanted, but that's okay, I'll just mention this. So what do we mean by this is, if we have 100 sensors, right? Again, I am deviating, I'll just mention it and stop it. If we have 100 sensors and 100 sensors sensing this signal, right? We want to make some decisions based on this 100 sensors. So for that, individual sensor processing is not, individual sensor processing is what an individual DSP will do. But if you want to do anything more, right, that takes us to the next level, which is what data analytics or machine learning parts will look at it. So I'm not going to get into that. You will see some of it in the last day. For example, very specific to audio, right? You will see how audio signal processing is again kind of a subset of a digital signal processing. You will see how audio signal is processed to do something like a feature representation. And then once you do a feature representation, this feature representation needs signal processing or digital signal processing. In some sense, that is what this thing says. When it was mentioned that, okay, I want to analyze the vibration signal, I want to look at the frequency domain, right? So this frequency domain representation is like a feature. So for example, if I want to, I'm just interested in, let's say, a sinusoidal signal, right? So assume this is the signal I'm interested in. Let's say if this is of some frequency which is, let's say, 60 hertz or 50 hertz, then what I want to kind of represent is, I may want to, let's say, represent so as a signal, if I say, okay, this is a sinusoidal signal which is time varying with this is a time varying signal with some amplitude, but I don't want this entire duration of the signal to represent that it is a sinusoid of 60 hertz, right? I only need, let's say, if this f is 60 hertz, I just need to say that this is a signal of 60 hertz. So which means I will form a vector, let's say, I'll just say xf, which is the feature vector, and I'll say this has many components. Let's say, for example, I'll make all, say this may, let's say this is in terms of 10 hertz and so on. So I'll have 0 0 0 and then maybe somewhere 1, everything else is 0 0 0 0, right? So this is like, again, the simplest way of saying that I did some analysis, which is a signal processing analysis. I looked at the signal. As was mentioned, I am interested in finding the frequency component of the signal. Maybe I'll find what is the filter, I'll filter it, or somehow I'll find the frequency, and if I find that frequency to be some value, let's say f, so then I populate one vector which is, let's say this is saying, just to keep it simple, if you say this is the representation, let's say the sixth one being 1 is saying it's a 60 hertz signal. If instead, if it is f is, let's say, 20 hertz, then my xf will be 0 0 1 or 0 1 0 0. This is just to give you a sense, right? So this is what I meant by feature extraction. So to extract features, you need to analyze this signal, and that's a DSP or signal processing helps. Okay. Beyond this, once these features are extracted, how these features are extracted, how these are all used is what your data analysis and machine learning is about. And going from, so the algorithm used in this feature extraction, right? This depends on the signal you are analyzing. So that's why if you are looking at an audio signal, you need to look for something more useful. Which is more useful in an audio signal? versus if you're looking at a vibration signal, what is more useful in a vibration signal, right? So these kind of change depending on domains. For example, if I'm looking at an image, frequency there may mean something else. So then I have to know how to get some feature representation for that image, and again use that feature representation. Sometimes once I get this feature, the thing analysis can be done on the device, which is like your IoT, instead of a sensor you have a device, and the device does every kind of action. So for example, like as I mentioned yesterday, this Amazon Alexa kind of thing, the device itself, if you think of it as a sensor, it's a sensor because it has a set of microphones. There are like 6-7 microphones on this, and that is a device which senses and does some action there itself, right? So there is some DSP involved locally, and many of the things are done locally, but some things are sent to the cloud. So that is why I think whether you look at audio processing, or when you look at image processing, or you look at video processing, which are little more than just a 1D processing, you need to make a choice. Is it something to be done locally, which is on the device, or can it be just sent to some remote location like a cloud? You do some processing or inference in that cloud, then send back the inference back, right? So I think that is kind of, I mean, that's where this is taking you to. So this is not saying you have to do something special if it is an IoT. There is nothing special if you are an IoT device. You just need to understand DSP, and then once you understand DSP better, you can use it for any IoT application you want to look for. Okay? So here again, I am not trying to convince that, oh, this DSP which I am talking about is only for IoT. There is nothing, no such notion here. It's more an introduction to DSP, that's all. It's just that since we are talking about IoT, this fits into that kind of title, I would say. Right?
I can think of one more application.
Okay.
Like say, I can think of application like home healthcare. Like say, suppose we have wearable devices. We can, like say, 100 students are present, 100 participants are present. If we have a wearable devices, we can wear it. We can get the data from wearable devices from a subject, which can be transferred onto a cloud. We can do a lot of analysis there. And wherever there is a fault or there is some kind of disorder, we should be able to generate triggers that can be considered as an IoT application from DSP perspective.
Yeah, so that's why. So you can keep on. We can think of many applications which fit into this platform. So, and this lecture is more for like to understand DSP. So let's go to that. But before that, again, I know this is a bit of a deviation. So which I wanted to say yesterday, but I didn't say. So one thing we were thinking is, I think so. There are groups of you formed irrespective of the lab groups. You can make 2 or 3 people as groups. So think of some good IoT application, and each of you can, let's say, submit like a 1-page write-up or a half-page write-up, whatever it is. I think the more you write, that means the more you have thought about it. So if you can do it by, let's say, Thursday evening, Friday is the last day. So I mean, I sincerely encourage all of you to attempt it. Just think one application and see, okay, here is an application. It could be mainly based on your domain. And that's what we are expecting, that use your domain knowledge. Think of a good application. I mean, if you go to the internet, there are many such things. I think we don't want that kind of thing. You think on your own. I mean, it's okay if it is there already, that doesn't matter. But do think of your own and say, okay, here is a way we would achieve this, I don't know, goal or application. And to do this goal or application, you go through this entire thing which we at least what Professor Pramod outlined yesterday. What is the sensor? What is the interface circuit? What is the activator if needed? What kind of features do you extract? Based on that features, what do you analyze? And then once you analyze, how do you activate something, or what do you do after activating, right? So I mean, this is just, I mean, it's like a competition if you want to think. So we will look at all these proposals, and if there is a good proposal which many of us agree, then we could, I don't know, give some things out. Okay, I don't know what is that. Like it could be an, I don't know, Arduino kit or the whole interface, or Raspberry Pi, something like that, right? So because I think I have to agree that we are doing this IoT course with hoping that we can convince many of you that no, IoT is nothing special. IoT is just everything's put together. The specialty or the importance comes only we make it active, make some application which is really appealing. Maybe people have not done, maybe it helps their local region, right? So this is what we think will be useful. So with that in mind, and also to address some of your concerns like, oh, we are not being exposed to much, but let's see how much you know about these things, and the more detailed your proposal is, the better it will be, and then we can kind of compare and contrast. Okay? So I'll post it on Moodle also, but I think just take this, and by Thursday evening, if groups, either the lab groups or independently as a college or whatever it is, just submit us a one-page write-up of what do you think is a good IoT application and how do you plan to kind of take it forward, right? So with some little more detail, not like what we wrote in kind of the syllabus. Okay, this has to be a little bit more specific if we can. Right? So let's then come back. I think I spent too much time outside of DSP, which is okay because I think I'll go through this since maybe many of you know already some of these things. So the first, this I already said, what do we mean by digital signal is given this analog time domain signal, it's 1D. We want to take this analog signal and represent it digitally. Why do we want to represent it digitally? Why not just use analog signal? For a longer time. Temporary storage, buffering, those things are possible, but
there may be infinite points between any time interval.
correct. So one is storage, which means you can't just store for ever and then process this analog signal. What else? Find errors. What do you mean by find errors?
Much easy to comprehend once we have certain mathematics involved in it.
Digital signal is more prone to digital signal or analog signal?
Digital signal is more immune to noise.
Immune to noise. Yeah. So the
Yes. That's what.
yeah. So the processing which we are aware of more commonly is all digital processing, and that's why we want to digitize signal again, including storage, immunity to noise. There are many aspects of representing a signal digitally. Of course, in the past there have been analog computers also, but that's very, very special and we are not going to those. So that's why we need to take this digital, this signal which could be, as I mentioned already, sensor outputs like temperature, vibration sensors, voice, which is microphones, all these signals, analog world are discretized and you get your digital signal. Again, what is involved in converting that continuous time signal to this discrete signal? Sampling, right? So again, this was mentioned yesterday. I'll just, maybe this is something probably interesting to some of you who have not heard about it, but maybe many of you have heard about it. So you have seen this old TV movies, right? So have you noticed, or even new TVs I would say, have you noticed the car wheel in these movies, or bullock cart or whatever wheels in these movies? Have you seen such things? Anything special about that?
When we
Yeah.
see
Yeah. Do you know why? Perception. Something. Yeah, that's the easy word to say, but it is. Yeah, some of you would probably know, but if you kind of haven't seen or haven't paid attention to that aspect of it, that is essentially aliasing. So the reason I'm just saying is, I just had an opportunity to say it, so let me say it. So of course, sampling, we all know Nyquist rate, twice the frequency, like as Professor Pramod mentioned it. Twice the frequency only works for band limited signals. If your signal is like an impulse, which means it's a very broad band signal, then just twice the Nyquist will not be sufficient to get your record sampling. But just to kind of show that this, yes, indeed is something interesting, and that's what you're seeing in these movies. So let me just so this is nothing we have made. It is available on YouTube. Just for those, I mean, I'm sure now if I show that you'll agree that this is what is happening. So what is shown here is just it's just a wheel rotating. Okay, if you see that it rotates in some direction and it is at some slower speed. Okay, there is this blue kind of clip, if you want to think of. That clip is there, and what is being shown in this demo is essentially what you, sometimes we think it's perception. I mean, you can think of it as perception. It's not actually perception. It's actually because of aliasing, something is happening and it just turns to be like perception, but it is not perception. So that's all. I mean, that is just to illustrate a simpler way of understanding aliasing. So now the way you can think of it is, it's like saying, if you have, let's say, a circular disc or something, and you can think of a dot being somewhere on the peripheral of the circle, right? So this disc, let's say, is a rotating disc. So now you can think of taking a torchlight and assume this disc rotates at certain speed. Now let's say you take this torchlight and turn on and off the torchlight at some same speed as this disc, right? So if I shine a light on this disc and using a torchlight, if I am turning on and off the torchlight at the same speed as the disc, what will happen? So this is a rotating disc. Yeah, the dot will look like it remains stationary. It won't look like it's moving, though the disc is moving, right? So essentially that is what you are seeing in this movie wheel or wagon wheel effect, and essentially that is what aliasing is. So if you make it slower than the speed of the disc, then it leads to aliasing, and which means you will think that as if this thing is actually rotating in the anti-clockwise direction, but actually it's rotating in the clockwise direction. The reason it looks like it is rotating in the negative direction is it takes time to catch up with the probe or the strobe light, and that is what seems like it is aliased kind of dot, right? So again, why is this important? It is important because as was mentioned yesterday, you could get kind of completely different signals if you don't do it in the right way. I'll just complete this part since I started showing it. So in the beginning it will rotate slowly, which means it is in the direction, but then afterwards the speed of the video which is capturing, there is a video capture of this thing happening, right? So there is a disc rotating and there is a video capturing. This video capture is at like 25 frames per second. As long as that disc is rotating and so you can see less than half the 25 frames per second, it will rotate in a kind of the way it is supposed to look like. But as you see, after some time, maybe let me just go. After some time, you will see that the disc starts rotating in the opposite direction. Okay? And sometimes it will look, so if you look at the blue one, it will look as if it is rotating clockwise, and this inner wheel will rotate in the anti-clockwise direction. And towards the end, if you really see, once it slows down, if it is in the slower speed, then you can see that okay, this is actually rotating in the direction which the disc was. So this is just about sampling, and there are again some interesting useful applications for sampling, and once you sample using appropriately, you get your digital signals, right? Once you get the digital signal, this in this case is a discrete kind of in time, but what we are interested usually is again representing this discrete time domain values. So that kind of takes us to the next thing, which is also more important in representing signals, is if you did something in the x-axis, that is only in time, it's discrete, but we also want to look at in y-axis. So this y-axis is essentially what you do in microprocessor and everything. You have to relate it to the number of bits you have to represent the signal, right? Again, some of this was stressed, so there is nothing specific about IoT. Any signal you want to represent, you have to make this trade-off. So in this case, again, the range of this signal will decide how many bits you want to use to represent such a signal, right? So for example, how many bits are required to represent audio signals? Is there any standard way to find it, or is there just some specific thing? Sorry? It's 8 bits. Why 8 bits? Do you know?
So under the sampling, the signal will be restricted to 4 kilohertz.
So that is the sampling frequency. The sampling frequency is 8 kilohertz, or you could have 8 kilohertz because your range of voice frequency is 0 to 4, so that's 8 kilohertz in terms of the sampling frequency. In terms of the bits itself, is there any? Yeah, so it's just based on the amplitude. So it doesn't necessarily mean whether it's an audio signal or a temperature sensor or whatever. So you just have to look at the range of values which the signal can take, And in your case, if this microphone outputs certain voltages, you want to represent this voltages in certain number of bits, and that kind of decides how many bits you need to represent your analog amplitude values which were you started off with. And then when you go and digitize and represent it using this discrete sample, you just need enough samples so that you can distinguish between adjacent samples, right? So again, this choice is depending on your application. You have to see what is the range of the values you are going to represent. Use that range usefully to represent the number of bits. So the lower limit is based on the minimum you want to rep. What is the maximum limit of number of bits you want? I mean, is there a restriction on the maximum number of bits you want?
That is that depends on the memory that is available to store down.
Yeah, so I think that is the only thing, right? So in the past, we didn't probably care much about the number of bits. If you look at the processors, the CPUs which we are using for our regular computation, they had larger and larger number of, meaning we had 16-bit processors, then they become 32, now you have 64-bit processors, right? So the number of bits become larger and larger because you're representing these values can become more and more accurate, right? But the trade-off is once you have larger or more number of bits to represent the signal, that means you also have to store these signals, and that means that will need more memory, right? So again, these are the kind of trade-offs you have to make, and you have to just decide based on this trade-offs as to how much storage is allowed, and then how much accuracy do I need in representing the signal, right? So these things again help you decide, and the way you decide this essentially depends on what you know about the signal and how you want to process the signal in the digital domain, right? So in addition to whatever we discussed, so these are the few other things. So once in analog world, repeating same thing is going to be very difficult, whereas in the discrete or digital representation, you can recreate similar things, right? Because once you fix let's say the number of bits you represent and the sampling rates you have, you could almost mimic exactly the signal which you had earlier, but which is very difficult to do other than the analog world.
Is there any standard rule to set the minimum number of bits you were asking?
Yeah, so I think the question is there a standard rule to fix the minimum number of bits? Well, let's ask others and then I'll give my.
Okay.
Does anyone have an answer? Is there a standard to say here is the minimum number of bits we need? So what would be your guess on the minimum bit?
The quality will be low if the number of bits will be less, but I am just asking if there is any rule or not,
yeah.
Or just this is on visually or audible. It is how is the quality? It will depend on that only.
Correct. Yeah. So I think you will get a little bit more specific about the audio itself a little later. But for now, if there is a question about what is the minimum number of bits we need to represent any such signal, so that depends on what we want to do with the signal. So for example, if I want to just, like as was mentioned here, I am getting, let's say, an analog signal somewhere, and if I am only interested in a threshold, that is one value, right? And I want to just compare, is the signal which I look at, is it more than this threshold or less than that threshold, right? So if that is all I want to decide, then it can be done even with a single bit, right? If I represent this entire signal using a single bit, that is, is it above a threshold, then it is 0. If it is below a threshold, it is 0, right? If I represent this signal using single bits, then it means that it seems one bit is sufficient to make what we want to do, right? So that is why I was saying what we want to do with the signal will decide what is the number of bits we want to represent, right? Instead, so again, I think it's a valid question in the sense, this alone, meaning that just the DSP or the processing alone is not going to decide the number of bits. What is going to decide is we have an ADC before this signal is digitized, right? So that ADC will have certain limitations as to how many bits can it represent, right? So that is where you have to make a choice as to, do I go, so for example, the reason why the ADC is tied, why the ADC is tied to the DSP is, so there are two things. One is the number of bits. That's your question. The other is also sampling when you are kind of interfacing an ADC to the DSP. So this ADC sometimes is part of a DSP, but otherwise you can look at it as an independent quantity. So what happens is, if we want a fast sampling ADC, right, then that means they become more and more costlier, just because the way we want to manufacture ADCs, which is internally driving something, they become more and more costlier. So sometimes you have to trade off between, do I need a faster sampling rate but smaller bits, or smaller sampling rate but more number of bits. The more number of bits just gives you more representation, and then later in the DSP you could decide, do I use all the bits or not, right? So that, again, this is not something which I so what I wanted to just mention with this is, in the past this has been very critical. Like, so for example, DSPs, the current way of looking at DSPs is, this is just a much more powerful CPU, right? That is how it is being looked at. You could write your programs and it will do as fast as what you want, right? But when you get to these IoT like devices, one thing which you could do is, say for example, you will probably only have, let's say for example, you have some 8-bit representation, right? This 8-bit representation, what would be the, so basically you can go from, depending on the kind of number systems, right? You can, meaning, do you want to use this 8 bits to represent as such, that is it just an integer or is it a floating point value, right? That floating point value means I'll use, let's say 3 bits to represent the integer part and 5 bits to represent the decimal part. That means I can represent much larger numbers when I start manipulating these bits into some bits representing some part and some bits representing the exponent part. But all this is kind of internal. What I want to just bring it is, so if I want to look at for the minimum number of bits required, the main thing driving me is the application. Once I know that this is the number of bits I require, I can again trade off somewhere here in the ADC or the DSP to exploit that number of whatever I have, right? It could be my cost, which means I have to have a cheaper ADC, but there is a flexibility. Even with a cheaper ADC, I could do some representation which are different in a DSP, so that even though it's 8 bits, I could do some trade-offs and represent much larger values, right? Like, as for example, a floating point. Or sometimes I may not need a floating point value, but I may need something slightly lower than a floating point value.
Actually, the process of quantization is happening in the ADC, not
Correct.
in DSP.
Not in the
DSP is just processing the
Correct.
already converted data.
Correct. Sometimes this ADC forms a part of the DSP, but usually
This is part.
quantization.
This is part of.
Correct. So what I am saying is, once you quantize, which means you get this, you can still represent it in a better way. That's all I was trying to get. Right? So that's, I think, the next.
Resolution, sir.
Yeah, that's
It's
the resolution of.
If we have a n bit, then its resolution is 2 to the power of n.
Yeah.
Actually, that depends on the processing of the signal in a DSP.
Correct. No, so that's why that limits the ADC limits the resolution as
Yeah.
to what is the minimum you could get. But once you get and you want to do some further processing on that even smaller signal, you could do something more intelligent if you try doing some manipulation of this. Say, for example, if this gives an 8-bit representation, this 8-bit representation can be used in a DSP, but you could do slightly more than what you had done with the ADC with an 8-bit representation if you choose your appropriate number system, which means it can be a floating point one or it could be a fixed point one.
Compatibility between ADC and DSP.
Yeah, compatibility, and also exploiting some of the dynamic range. Like, this fixes some range, you could exploit some processing here in the DSP to kind of play with your range of values which you could process. So this we already saw that you could do sampling for band limited signals, and which is basically the Nyquist rate. I showed you this example where you can you see kind of what happens during aliasing. again, this is like, this is nothing very specific, but this is just saying that all these choices, which were some of the questions you had, the idea is why do we need a theory and how this relates to this implementation aspect, right? So maybe let me just quickly show this view. Yeah, so this is what I was saying. So you can either, which kind of leads to the, I mean, which was what I was mentioning, is once your ADC fixes the number of bits, you have a certain number of bits. You could use that number of bits, let's say for example in this case 8 bits. You could say either I use 3 bits to represent the integer part of it and 5 bits to represent the decimal part of it, or you could say I will just use 1 bit to represent, let's say, the integer part of it and 7 bits to represent the exponential. It's like saying my ADC has given me some values, I want to make sure that I exploit the entire range of the ADC, right? So this is some flexibility you have, and this is decided based on the kind of DSP you are using. In the lab which you will do towards the end of the session, you'll do this on a what is called a fixed point processor, okay? So which means this helps you do this processing little bit more efficiently, in the sense cost wise it's going to be cheaper, it's going to consume less power. Again, this was one of the things which I think Professor Pramodan mentioned. Among many trade-offs in terms of accuracy and in terms of speed, the other thing also is power consumption, right? So this power consumption, of course DSPs typically consume slightly less power than a CPU, but they consume more power than a microprocessor. So when, even though they consume more power than a microprocessor, there are ways you could be very close to a microprocessor when you use this fixed point process, and this is something you will use later. Again, and I think some of these questions were already asked, what is good enough? Good enough depends on what kind of applications we are looking at, right? If I am looking for just let's say person speaking and I am repeating and he's being recorded and played, there you would see typically standard wise about 8-bit kind of representation is good enough. But if you want to go to, let's say, some singing person with some variations in pitch and some basic instruments, then you need at least like say 12 bits, right? But if you want to have even better quality music where very sensitive equipments are used, then it seems that for a good person who can listen, for a normal listening for us, we can only kind of appreciate up to 4 kilohertz and maybe just around 4 kilohertz. But there are good people who can listen and hear even above 4 kilohertz, and they can make some differences, right? Which we can't, or not all of us can do. So which means there you need better sampling rates and higher number of bits to represent, right? Again, with a trade-off, where do you want to store, how do you want to transmit, how do you want to like use it, all this becomes choices which depending on the application we'll have to make, right? So all those aspects, though the ADC controls the number of bits, with a DSP you can manipulate some of these things. So that's all this thing is trying to show or say, right? Again, this may be only for people who have not done any formal course in DSP, but I just thought this view will just help you. So you have, so when we talk about this DSP, this is how, as I mentioned before. So you have a continuous signal, you have an ADC, the DSP is doing some processing, you are converting back. So the way the aliasing fits in is through this process, either in the analog to digital part, right? As long as you make sure that you, for band limited signals, if it is more than the maximum, twice the maximum frequency, you could also do what is the next part, which is reconstructing, right? So why do we need reconstruction? Reconstruction you can look at as taking in and reconstructing, or something which is stored and played out, right? So like synthesis of, let's say for example, voice signals, right? If you want to generate some voice signals, you could have stored all the signals and just play it back, right? When you play it back, again you have to make sure that you reconstruct it in the way, so this sampling again plays a part there, in the sense you could reconstruct the signal as it was intended to be played, okay? If you don't choose this appropriately, again you'll have some reconstruction issues, which means you may not sound like you, right? So again this is again a view of how DSP plays a part. And then the other aspect which was mentioned in the beginning, right? So I thought I'll just give this view for those of you who have not looked at DSP in little bit more detail, right? So here this is the thing to focus is about what do filters do? Okay, the filters we are talking about here are discrete time systems, which means if you look at what is called as impulse response of the system, these are time indices, let's say 0, 1, 2 and 3. Here it is a 3, 4, filter of length 7, which is what we are considering, right? So based on this, right, this h of n here, what do you, I take this filter and apply this filter to the input signal. What do you think will this filter do? I mean, it's not like I am not trying to test, I'm just so that those of you who have not done DSP would get some sense for what is happening, and then you can relate to what you are going to do in the labs also, right? So this is that filter, maybe I'll just draw it here. Maybe I'll draw a simpler one, then we can. So this is a representation of a discrete time filter, right? So this is this h of n, which is the impulse response of a system, right? So what do you think will this filter do? So meaning if there is an x of n, which is an input to a system like this, we'll get some output y of n, right? So in this case, what is this h of n doing? Yeah, so you will not get the same. So it's what is it doing? This is a length 1. Each of the samples is 1, which means it is going to take x of n and delay it by as many samples as you want, and you will get an average of x of n at every time, right? This is what is called as it's called a moving average filter. Again, is more for those who have not. So why are we saying this? This is like, so average is something we know, right? So if we have some signal which is, let's say, just varying too much, just discretize it, you have a discrete signal. The first thing typically we do when we want to smooth this signal is just average this signal, right? You take 2-3 samples, average it, so you'll get a smoother line, you get smoother line and smoother line, right? So this is how we know in terms of general signals as to if you want to smooth a signal, right? So the same kind of thing is what this discrete time filter is trying to do. It is trying to average a set of sample values and give one value output. So the operation which does this is usually called as a convolution operation, right? Which is essentially, in some sense, place the signal on top of it or reverse it, multiply sample by sample and add it, okay? Which is what an averaging operation does. In this case, this moving average filter is like a low pass filter, which means if you think of variations on the signal as a high frequency component, all those high frequency component will be removed and you'll get a smooth signal. So I don't know whether it was done yesterday. Was it in the temperature sensing, was the filtering applied yesterday? You did, right? So you did that moving average filter. So essentially that is what this is, right? It's just convolution of a filter, something like this. You can use longer and longer filters. What is the disadvantage of using a longer and longer filter? One is computational cost. What else? Slower. Why slower? So more number of samples. So what? Yeah, so you have to wait till so long, like if this is, let's say, some end line, you have to wait till end samples for the output to get updated. So every time you compute such a long filter, you have to wait that long to compute, right? So both are important, that is, length means storage and also delay in computation, right? So these are things which, again, these are simple ideas, they are not very sophisticated, but they are a little more powerful than what you would think. But you have to make the right choice. Which filter to use? Can I just use any filter? How do I make those choices? Again, just knowing DSP helps you make a good decision. That's what I wanted to say here, and that is what is shown here. What is shown here is a slightly different filter than that averaging filter, and the notion of frequency domain, which again is stressed upon in DSP at least, is you may see that it is not directly implementable, but it gives you first to understand, and that is where, like for example, the features which we talk about, right, they have a relation to what is happening, and the frequency domain representation helps us understand that. The machine may not understand that, but since we understand what the machine or the device is going to do, we use that interpretation to build our system, right? So in this case, this filter which is in time domain looks like this. If I map it to this frequency domain, and if I have normalized radian frequencies, it will have a response like this, which is like a low pass filter, meaning if this is 0.5 pi, it's going to allow signals in this range, and it's not going to allow signals outside that frequency range, right? So once you, so this is again an interpretation, which is some analysis you do in DSP like courses, right? That just helps you interpret what is this signals or system going to do. Again, an equivalent thing is the Z domain or Z transform. Not getting into detail, but this relation between all these three is useful to understand an LTI system, and many systems in practice are LTI system. In practice, sometimes what you have is, rather than having time invariant system, there are time variant systems. For example, adaptive systems. Sometimes this filter has to adapt, right? So those may find application in IoT, but I don't think that just only that's the only application. There are many applications. So this notion of frequency response and the smoothing kind of operations is very effective in even simple signal processing, which means that temperature monitoring and other things. But it could be also useful for audio kind of thing, where you want to make features which and enforce some things from that feature. Okay. So this is, that's why it's important, and this is just a quick sketch. So if this input signal is time domain looks like this, I discretize it and I look at, let's say, a DTFT or DFT of this representation. It may look like this kind of thing, like this red is the frequency axis, Y is the frequency magnitude. What does this show? That there is one dominant peak, there are some small peaks on the side, right? So this dominant peak corresponds to this sinusoidal signal, which is certain frequency, let's say 50 hertz or something, and there are maybe this other ripple like thing, right? That's like some other frequency component which is not very dominant maybe, so that's why you have a peak at this point, right? Now you kind of apply your filter. What does applying a filter mean? Like the what I showed in the previous figure, you apply this, so you remove this part. If you remove this part, you get something like this, which means this later frequencies are removed, which means you get kind of a little cleaner signal. Not very obvious here, but if you take this discrete signal, you reconstruct it with the right frequency, you will end up what is shown on the right. That is almost like a signal which was noisy has now become a smooth signal, right? Again, what do I want to say through this is, you can always look at signals as sum of sinusoids. It can be multiple channels, single channel, whatever it is, and then you exploit what you can do with your filters or systems which you know very well about in linear time analysis. It could be a differentiator, it could be an integrator, it could be any such systems which you have looked at, right? You apply them through the signals and you kind of get back kind of, let's say in this case, a denoised signal, right? So that is where DSP fits in terms of understanding and doing some things which are more meaningful for us, so that we can make sense out of something. Let's not go, so I already mentioned it. So this is what is called as convolution. Okay, for those of you who have not seen this thing before, this is something which is very powerful. Almost every DSP operation you do is done through this convolution. The other point which I wanted to make is, when we talk about DSPs, which is like this digital signal processors, digital signal processing is what we are talking about. But if you want to look at DSP as a device, you have this operation which is very common, which is called, what is this called operation? What operation is called? Convolution, some other name in terms of implementation. Time shifting and multiplying together, what is it called? This is like more an implementation term. This is called a MAC, which is a multiply and accumulate, right? So this is something which can be done very efficiently in hardware, and these DSPs which you use for other than CPUs, they usually have such units, which means they may have 1 or 2 such units, which make it very more faster than what a CPU would do, and that's why this operation here is also useful to know and remember when you're trying to use a DSP. Okay? That's all I wanted to say. Yeah, so I again briefly mentioned about this earlier. Why do we do this frequency analysis? Is essentially, I didn't write it here, but it's going to give you feature vectors. Okay? Once you have feature vectors representing a signal, you can do many more things in terms of machine learning or analyzing the data to get some sense of what happened to the signal, right? So though they look very analytical and they may not be very, I don't know, very nice to look at, they are sometimes very useful, and only thing is you have to make the processor or machine understand what you are trying to do. While we understand this, sometimes machines may not understand this directly. So we need a kind of a transition from this analysis and representation to a more number-like representation, right? That's what which I showed in the beginning was something like that. This frequency is something we understand, so we need to map it to some other feature vector which machines can also understand and operate on them. So I think that's basically what I had. Maybe I'll finish a little early, but again, it's not very critical. So the equivalent in convolution is, it's as if saying that if you have sinusoids as input, what happens to the sinusoid, right? That's what happens in frequency domain. So you can relate, one way to relate your DFT, if you're familiar with, or DTFT, right, which is the frequency domain representation of a signal. What it does is essentially take this signal, as in Fourier series, we just break it up into many sinusoids and cosines. Similarly, break this x of n into multiple complex exponentials, and then you look at what happens to this complex exponential, right? So that essentially is what, if your system is LTI, is what we are trying to do. Okay? All this analysis on frequency domain using DTFT and FFT kind of operations essentially helps us analyze how does this system behave for, let's say, a sinusoid. And once we understand how it behaves for a sinusoid, we are trying to extend this and say any signal can be represented sum of sinusoid. So whatever analysis we do here is extendable to that system in complete form. For those of you who are more interested in matrix kind of representation, you can also look at this as one of the eigenvectors of the input, which means anything this system does which is represented by a matrix is essentially some scaling of the input signal, right? It's like saying your low pass filter or a high pass filter is saying at certain frequency you have some high values, that means it's going to be a high pass filter or a low pass filter, and then accordingly you manipulate or change A, which is the system representation, so you can achieve what you want to do using your filter. These are probably not necessarily IoT, but you could do many of these things using. So this is something which has started happening. So that's why the question can even be, why should we even look at DSP for IoT? I think there are still certain applications. For example, all your mobile phones have a DSP, but the way the DSPs are now is they are what are called as the SOCs. There is some specialized DSP operation happening. In addition, there is a CPU beside the DSP which does more CPU like operations, which means if you want to just handle data and if you want to do things in non-real time, right, your CPU is better off doing it. But if you want to do, let's say for example, your communication kind of thing which has to be done in real time, these have to be done in the DSPs, right? So that's why more recently that you have embedded and mobile process which are much more friendly to DSP like operations, and so that's another way why this DSP or understanding DSP and DSP operations helps in the context of IoT. So I think that's all I had. Any specific questions? So later I think you will see at least two aspects which you will see related to DSP. Of course, the next continuing part is on how communication will help. Again, the question need not be that what is there in communication that is specific about IoT. It will be again maybe some different view of communication. Like here I don't think I gave any different view of DSP. I just put in perspective what aspects of DSP fit into the IoT. The next one again may be more on different ways of looking at communication, but here is one way of looking at some aspects of communication, right? Any questions?
Is it what I feel is that in IoT, whatever signal, whatever measurement we are taking with the help of any sensor,
It is not always required that we do any signal processing on that, because sometimes we can do the work like in the continuous temperature monitoring, where we will get the information about the like 25 degree, 26 degree. So this numeric information will be sufficient for us to do the later part of the processing. In some of the signals where the signal itself gives the information, like ECG or physiological signal generally are like that, which falls in under this category. In those application only DSP is required. Is it like that?
Yeah, so the question is that is DSP required for all applications or it depends on the kind of signal?
Yes.
So I agree that there are some signals which certainly need some in-between processing like the biomedical signal to make some inference, right? The other thing is it's not necessary that all processing needs a DSP. If that is the question. Like I wouldn't say DSP in the processing part. As a processor, I would ask that question first. Do I really need a DSP as a processor, right? Yes, I agree there are many applications where you may not need any DSP, because even in the temperature sensing, depending on what you want to do, you may not need a DSP as a processor, but you still do some, I mean, if you think of this as a filtering or a smoothing, it's a smoothing operation, which if you think if it's smooth over a longer time, you want to do it faster, then you may need a DSP like processor. Otherwise, yeah, you don't need it. So whereas certain applications do need always a DSP, and that is why I was trying to say, I mean, should I say it's a DSP or it's just a good sophisticated processor, right? It doesn't have to be, the reason I'm saying is DSP means it has its own restrictions and advantages. The restrictions mainly are it doesn't have a large memory usually. It has a very small footprint in terms of what it can store on itself, right? So in that case, you can think of whether if I am building a biomedical sensor which is just going to sense and act locally, right? Then you may be okay with just using a DSP. But if you want to store and do something, then you may have to think, okay, DSP with CPU, with some memory, something which you. So I think that these are all valid questions you should ask, and you may not need a DSP always. Sometimes you may need, sometimes you may not need. Yeah, I think that's again a valid thing.
Yeah,
So for
because
example,
communicating the entire raw data over the I think
any Wi-Fi.
any Wi-Fi or something, we consume more data.
Correct.
So in order to reduce the data at the local nodes, we can do some preliminary processing at the nodes, and then
That
so
is
for
more
that DSP can be used, and send the processed data over the wireless channels or something like that.
Yeah, that is more useful for, let's say, audio and image like application where you can't really transmit assets, right?
Yeah, like mobile edge computing and
Mobile
also
signal.
these things actually, like even the edges, take part in the computation. So
Correct. So I think that's how the trade-offs and things have to be looked at. What should be done locally? If I can't do it locally, if I have to send it out, what should I do? And to send it out, the easiest thing as was mentioned is compress it and send it. Compression essentially is one feature of DSPs. Again, you could do it with a CPU also, but DSPs have certain inbuilt compressors which you can compress and then transmit. Any other questions, comments?
DSP processor will be in addition to the general.
Correct. DSP processor sometimes would be in addition, but now if you look at your mobile processor like Qualcomm and other things like Snapdragon, what they have is they have a kind of ARM core which is like the main CPU, and then they have a DSP core. So they are all in one, what I call a system on chip, but they do specific processing depending on what you want to do.
Yeah, we yesterday used this is DSP in that Arduino board.
The Wi-Fi might have had like the
When we
Wi-Fi.
are using that Wi-Fi application, we are using.
We
DSP.
could, yeah. So that's why I'm
It's
saying
a inbuilt processor.
it's an inbuilt. So sometimes, so that's why I think in long back, let's say 10-15 years back, there were separate DSPs always, but more and more often now they have all been integrated, and when they sell it, they just sell it as a powerful mobile processor. That powerful mobile processor will have all these components in it, RF component, in that case an RF component, maybe a simple processor to transfer data, and then a DSP to do some basic operations. Thanks.